Dahad of EE Times, and welcome to this latest edition of Silicon Grapevine. Today, my guest is Sam Imgrueth, who's a CEO of a company called Toradex. Sam, hello, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you, Nitin? Thanks for having me.
I'm fine, thank you. So, thank you for coming on. And so, let's just uh, get some idea. I'm not sure whether Toradex is well known by all our listeners, viewers, readers. So, just tell us a little bit about Toradex and what the company does.
Sure, yeah, I'd love to do that. So yeah, we're like an embedded boards company. So we build ARM-based system on modules or single board computers. These are kind of the brains that go into the industrial or medical devices that you see out there. And we really focus on building an off-the-shelf compute platform that's hardware and software that people can use to build their embedded AI-enabled smart devices of the world. And it allows the customer to really focus on their application while they can buy the computer platform and the software architecture from Toradex.
And just to give us a more complete picture, there's a couple of things. So one is yes, you do the system on modules. There's a lot of system on module providers. What sets you out apart, and then the other thing is you're really hot focused, and we'll come to that a little bit on just enabling secure AI enabled connected AI enabled devices. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's actually let me digest that question. Right? So, what is really Toradex doing different, or what are we offering? I mean, we hold ourselves pretty pride to calling ourselves a full stack provider. So let's maybe start at the very bottom. So we have a compute platform. So that's a processor. You add memory, flash, and build the computer board, the SOM or the SBC. Then on top of that, usually you run an operating system. That can be an embedded
Mm.
Linux, an Android, or so on. And that normally also want to get from your computer provider because that's a lot of work to maintain an operating system if you were to build your own embedded device. And then comes the customer application. That's usually in the customer's hands they deal with. But we also actually offer a framework that we call Horizon that
Yes.
really encapsulates the operating system that runs on top of the hardware together with an OTA update framework. So like a connected service, because think about the life cycle of these devices. People develop a smart AI enabled application. Think about maybe a medical device or a robot. Then this device is being sold to the customer, and the customer deploys it somewhere in the field. And these devices are out there for 7, 10 years in the field, running software, running applications that need to be managed and updated. So we really help with our Horizon software platform to take care of the operating system, but also allows the customer to maintain and update these devices when they're in the field. And this actually becomes more and more important as these processor technologies. Think about we're building boards based on Synaptics processors. These are
Correct.
latest
Yeah.
generation processors that have AI enablement. They have an NPU on it. So these AI applications, they're still new, especially in the industrial space or in the pro consumer space, and they need to be updated. So we offer that software framework. So to your question, how does Tordex actually differentiate? I think we have a very strong background on like really critical applications. Think about mission critical applications. They need to run 7, 10 years. They cannot fail. Like if
Yeah.
our boards or our software would fail in the field, it would have a significant like business impact for our customers. So we focus a lot on reliability. So build our hardware to be very reliable in our software stack. We also focus on the ease of use. So we want to make this product easy to be used, easy to be incorporated by our customers. So the ease of use is a very important fact for us. And then last but not least, that good developer experience, right? So we want to offer our customer tools and frameworks. So again, that they can focus on their application. They don't have to worry about the operating system or the processor that they're using. They just can use all the features of these complex silicons that Synaptics provides and really build their differentiating application. I would say these are the three elements where I would say Torex really differentiates.
All right. We'll come to your work with Synaptics later, but you talked about background. One of the things I do in Silicon Grapevine is talk to the people about their backgrounds. What was your background? How did you get into electrical engineering?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question. In fact, I was always amazed about computers since I was a child, and so I went to school, wanted to become an electrical engineer, which I then achieved. And luckily, there was a company called Toradex who wanted to expand actually into the US. So I'm originally from Switzerland, and so they were opening a US branch, and they recruited me back then as a developer engineer. So I joined Toradex 18 years ago as a simple customer support and developer engineers. There I got all this exposure to like helping customers build devices with Toradex product. And that really, that's really what I was all about. I really enjoy helping customer be successful using our product. And that has been my journey at Toradex. Been doing that for about 10 years, leading the development in the US, and then took over the lead of building a sales team, a technical sales team at Toradex, before I became the CEO in the company. And still today, I love working with our key customers. I love working with our product teams and really connecting these needs that customers have to building the products where we can make a difference in the market. So that's what drives us here at Toradex. That's also what gets me up every day, and what I love doing at Toradex.
I mean, just curious, how did you find the role at Toradex initially? I mean, was that just because you happened to be in the right place at the right time?
Yeah, well, I had a good connection. I mean, through my studies at Lucerne. So Toradex is actually what some people may not know is a spin-off, or was founded by the four founders who used to work at the Institute for Electronic at the Lucerne University. I studied there. I got my electrical engineering and computer engineering degree there. I had some connections, obviously, from my time at the school. I then later moved on to work at ETH Zurich in research a little bit. And then that connection, one of my former classmates reached out to me and said that Toradex has an opening, and he knew that I was passionate about computers. So that was an easy link to make.
And how is it? How's it different from being right at the like a development side, development engineer, to being CEO? I mean, there must be a lot of different sort of qualities you need to sort of learn.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. I mean, for me, it's funny because I've been at Toradex for 18 years. So you could imagine during my time
Yeah.
at the company, and obviously the growth that the company went through in these 18 years, I've pretty much seen and done everything you could think of that needs to be done in a company like Toradex. So for me, it wasn't something that I expected I would end up in when I started 18 years ago. It is something that I naturally grew into as the company grew. And obviously, my interest and passion for the industry really helps, because when you're passionate about doing something, normally, I guess you do a good job at it. And that was also helping me continuously grow within the company. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's a little bit the journey how I see it on my end.
All right, good. Let's talk a little bit about some of the big issues right now, and I think the big one is probably around because obviously things like CRA and cybersecurity type of regulations around the world. So that does affect a lot of what you do with the mission critical IoT and the hardware design. What are the big issues, and how is that being addressed in terms of security and hardware design?
Yeah, that's a good question, Nitin. I think a lot of our customers, they still don't fully understand and appreciate these new regulations and what's coming with the EU Cybersecurity Act. If you want to be able to actually sell a smart device or any kind of IoT, industrial IoT device in the European market, and that needs to be CE certified. That's a requirement to sell your device in the European market. You, in fact, need to be CRA compliant with your software that you're using on that device. That's a given now. And customers are scrambling now, right? I mean, these are complex requirements. They also come with very hefty penalties if you do not require to them. And some of these small to medium-sized companies, they do not have the teams. They don't have the engineering capability or capacity within their engineering teams to actually do that. And so that's a little bit where our offering comes in at Toradex, right? We have a ready to go software platform with Horizon that really ticks all the boxes for you, what you need to be CRA compliant. And again, CRA is only one standard in the US, in Europe, right? You have in the US, you have other standards like Medical Device Directive that goes into
Yes.
similar direction. I mean, ultimately comes down to your devices, if they do run some kind of software and they're exposed to the internet, obviously connected in some form, they need to be updated. They need to have, so you need to be able to monitor for vulnerabilities. If there is a new vulnerability that becomes public in the Linux
Yeah.
community and your
Yeah.
device has that, you need to be able to react and patch that in a certain time frame. So it's all about making sure you're running the latest software and you're locking down potential attack vectors on your devices that they could be used for malicious intent, obviously by someone who wants to hack these devices. Especially also very important if you have in Europe with the data protection laws, if you have like
Yeah.
customer data stored on your device, you need to be able to protect that data. I mean, once it's customer data, but for other companies, it's maybe their IP. If you have like sensitive information about your own product, you want to be able to protect that. You don't want that to leak out. So that's a little bit what really drives this.
Interesting. I think you said that not many customers understand. I think it's been an issue for a while in terms of security, but I do hear that there's more awareness since over the last 2 3 years when more regulations started. So are you finding it a little bit easier with some sectors of that community in terms of the understanding that they need to put security in?
Yes, it's definitely getting better. I mean, this topic about cybersecurity has been around for actually now almost 10 years. But unfortunately, and we have seen some of these big hacks or big data leaks, but unfortunately, none of these really has triggered the actions that we expect the device manufacturer would take by themselves. So I think that has triggered some regulatory action now from some of the governments, namely obviously in the European Union or especially for medical devices, also in the US. And so it's getting better. I agree. However, again, going back to the point I made earlier, now the fact that it is required still doesn't solve the problem for the customer, that this is a complex problem to solve and they need help. And so now they're more receptive, getting help, getting educated on the topic. But doing that in-house for a lot of the medium-sized companies, it's still very difficult. So the challenge still hasn't gone away, right? It's the awareness has gotten better, but the solution, actually finding a solution, that issue is still out there.
Okay. Um, and I think you were talking about it actually. A lot of people, I think it's at the software level, whether it's the firmware or it's directly sitting on the hardware. It's at that level they need to be looking at the security, isn't it?
Correct, correct. So I'll give you a good example, right? I mean, a lot of the processors, they actually come with all the requirements for many, many years, namely a secure boot. So you need to be able to encrypt basically your data on the processor level, and the processor obviously needs to support encryption. One
Yeah.
simple example. So that has been there. So the processor vendors like Synaptics have been offering that feature for many years. But the enabling of that feature does happen in software. An interesting analogy, what a lot of people don't realize at Toradex, 85% of our engineers are software engineers. I mean,
Mm.
embedded computer software engineers. So the hardware is really the small part. A lot of the value add that we provide at Toradex is through software. And now, especially now going back again into the cybersecurity and making that then available to the customer, a lot of that enablement comes from the software. So you said that correctly. So you'll have in the operating system, you'll need to enable these features, encryption, secure boot, remote access, and then again, on your application, you also need to have a framework. Let's just say you have an AI application. These AI models, like we talked about, they need to be updated as well. they can maybe have some flaw or also some vulnerability. So also on the software side, you need to be able to consider these cybersecurity requirements and be able to update your application. And that all happens on top of the hardware. So that's right. So a lot of it comes in software.
Thanks for that, because I think we were going to. I was going to actually ask you next about how things are changing due to AI and putting intelligence onto products, and maybe that sort of is a good segue into talking about your the work you're doing with Synaptics, how you're positioning it together, what work you're doing, and the boards. So let's start with the work with Synaptics.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks, Nathan. So with Synaptics again, we talked now a little bit about Toradex. What we do, we build computer modules, single board computers. I quickly touched a little bit about Horizon, which is really a software framework that provides you the operating system, developer, basically an application framework based actually on Docker containers. And then we have the cloud services, the connectivity service to allow you to update these devices, or let's call it the device lifecycle management, even on the software side, allow you to update the operating system, application, and so on. Now, we talked about that in a sense of Toradex. So you may think like, yeah, fine, if you buy a Toradex product, you get all of that.
Mm,
But that's actually not quite true. With Horizon, we have basically an independent product. So think about the software is actually more or less hardware independent. To give you an example, our Horizon software stack, it runs on x86 processor, it runs on ARM processors, even runs on RISC-V processor. So what we're partnering with Synaptics is actually, yes, we do have our own boards. We talk about that maybe a little bit later, our Luna board based on a Synaptics processor. But there are many, many existing customers out there that today use Synaptics-based designs. They did their own design, not using a Toradex module, and they still want to get that kind of cybersecurity software solution as they now need to comply with these new regulations. So we're actually supporting all the Synaptics customers and all the Synaptics products and processors with Horizon completely independent of the actual Toradex hardware. So that's actually the partnership we're doing with them. So we enable all their development boards, all their reference platforms with Horizon, which allows all their existing customers to immediately being able to tap into that Horizon software platform and benefit from these cybersecurity compliance solutions that we're offering for them.
okay, so the partnership, it basically enables you to offer that complete solution, what with the Synaptics processor, Astra processor, and also your platform, and marries that together. But also it can be with anybody's processor as well.
Correct. And actually, one thing I should point out is that's actually quite an important one. A lot of people are always worried. Let's just say they adopt Horizon, right? It's actually it's an open source platform. So we're not, especially the device software, so anything that runs on your device is still built like a traditional Linux. So maybe historically, these customers that built their own custom Linux, if they were to move to Horizon, this is actually quite simple because we also, our Horizon OS is open source. It's built
Mm,
similarly like an embedded Linux. So it's not
mm,
something custom, like we didn't reinvent the wheel. What we're doing at Horizon, at Toradex with Horizon, we're packaging known good open source software together, branding it Horizon, but it's also available open source for customers so that they know what we're doing, because you want to be able to be audited. Security is very important. It needs to be open so other people can review what you're doing. And the customer can also maintain that in the future themselves. So they're not tied to Toradex or Horizon in any way, right? They can just use Horizon, what we're doing almost as like a template of a good implementation in a Linux world that is cybersecurity compliant. And then they can pick and choose whatever they want to take from us or from other vendors. So I think that's very important to highlight, right? And that's why this partnership is so powerful for Synaptics, because it allows their existing Linux customers to migrate in a pretty easy way, to migrate them in a fully compliant cybersecurity platform, which is completely open source, right? And so that's very powerful.
And tell us a little bit about the Luna board and built with a Synaptics Astra, enabling industrial developers and design engineers.
Yes, so we talked a lot about software, but now going back a little bit to our roots, I mean, at
To the
Toradex,
hardware.
we do build single board computers, and that's of course how we're well known, SOMs and single board computers. So what we did with Luna is actually something quite interesting. It's based on the SL1680 platform. That's their current generation AI processors, and it's the highest end one that they have on their portfolio. And we put that on a very common single board form factor, basically the Raspberry Pi form factor, similar form factor,
Oh,
right?
okay.
But we
Yeah.
call it the
Yeah.
Luna board. And so, why is this so interesting, right? So, this allows, if you think about what's happening today, a lot of the people out there, they're prototyping applications with these community boards, the Raspberry Pis and, of the world and so on. But it's really difficult to take that proof of concept actually into production later,
Mm,
right? Because
mm.
these boards are not really designed to be taken into production. That's again where the Toradex
Well,
USP or differentiator
that
comes
comes
in,
from the
right?
that comes from the hobbyist nature of those kind of boards, I guess.
Exactly. But not just that, it's also, I mean, think about the education. I mean, a lot of the young engineers, what are they actually being trained on in school? A lot of them they
Mm,
use the Raspberry Pis, right, in school to train them how to build IoT applications. So when they go and first get their first job in a small company, what are they going to take, right, to build their first
mm.
proof of concept if a new project comes up? So it is really the way that today a lot of these proof of concepts and first projects are kicked off, and so that's not to be underestimated. And so we want to, of course, tap into this and allow now these people who use such boards in this, so it's form fit function compatible. So think about, you can now swap out such a proof of concept, the Raspberry Pi being used with the Luna board. You now have a fully production ready board, and not just that, you also have the AI enablement, right? Because the SL1680 processor has a very powerful NPU, almost up to 8 TOPS. And so now you don't just have a production ready platform, compute platform, but you also have an AI enabled modern compute platform that you can actually deploy in the field. So that's the idea there. So we want to allow existing customers to take their proof of concept to production and also give them the latest generation of AI process technology from Synaptics.
And have you already any examples of customers doing this? I guess you've been working on it for a while since the partnership was announced. Are there any interesting use cases or things you want to highlight?
Yeah, actually, the partnership, to be honest, is still quite new. I mean, we announced the board last fall at the Synaptics Tech Day, and we're only, and that was the first prototypes being shown, and we only actually start shipping now the product in Q1 and
In Q1 of 2026.
2026. Yeah, so it's still pretty new. We have a lot of pre-order and interest, but the typical applications that you can think of is you want to have like a couple cameras connected, so it has a very powerful camera interface. So for AI application, it's actually you have a camera, you want to connect it to the board, and then you want to run your AI software to do some analytics on your video. So that's a good one. Or just simple gateway application where you do data analytics. So you're collecting some type of data. If it's not camera, it can be some other sensor data. And then you want to locally process it with an AI model. And so these are some of the early projects that I know we're in, but I cannot give you any names today as it's still, like I said, we just have started sampling that board.
I mean, we're not expecting you to name names, but what's quite interesting is that you're seeing some traction with it, and I think that's quite
Yes.
interesting. But um, when they're looking at this, what is it that appeals to them? Is it that sort of vision processing? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, really the differentiators again. So for now, really the AI capabilities in that form factor. So that wasn't there
Yeah.
because the Raspberry Pis, they do not have, you need to have a secondary mezzanine card, like an AI accelerator plugged into it. So
Okay.
if you look at
Okay.
like buying the Raspberry Pi, buying the AI accelerator together, you now have two sets of boards with like a mezzanine card, and it gets quite expensive. So, I mean, obviously also this is a single board that has all that capability built in. So it's obviously from a price point of view quite interesting. Then the other thing is, of course, we designed this board with our industrial specifications in mind. And again, think about that bringing these customers from a proof of concept into actual volume production without having to redesign the board, right? So you can literally use the same board that you're doing your prototype with. You can use that to production. So I think that's the other. So again, cost-effective AI application, bringing it into production, and that industrial kind of use case. And so when we talk about industrial use case, to give you an example, we qualify our board for a 24/7 use case 10 years. So that means
Wow.
like when
Okay.
we're testing and qualifying our components that we use on our boards, we select them to be used really every day for 10 years. And when we're talking about being used, it's like the processor running at full speed. And so if you compare that to your mobile phone, if you actually were to use your mobile processor and use it in that kind of heavy use case, it would usually fail after 2 to 3 years because it has not been qualified. It has not been designed for such a use case. And again, that brings us back to what we talked about earlier, this mission critical
Mm.
applications where you want that IoT compute platform. It is the backbone of your system and it cannot fail. Think about a renewable energy storage system, or think about a wind turbine that has a monitoring gateway on there. It gets very costly if that kind of hardware fails for the operators, and so that's really what we know known for at Toradex.
So let's go back to a little bit about your journey now. It's very interesting talking about this. What are the big trends that are different now compared to what when you started? I guess it's all AI, but digging deeper.
No, that's that digging a little bit deeper. What we really are seeing is, again, I want to go a bit deeper on that complexity. I know now everybody talks about AI, but what really people do almost always underestimate, and I can tell you that from the project timelines. Like I told you, I've been supporting our customers for now 18 years and working closely with them. And of course, part of the discussion is always like, when do you want to go into production with your project? And I can tell you the delays have been getting longer, the complexity have increased,
Mm.
and complexity is not just from the technological side. Complexity also comes from the supply chain side, especially we're recording this podcast now as we're going through a pretty interesting time in the memory market, right?
Okay.
So
Yep.
think
Yep.
about if you're a small customer, small IoT. I mean, and if I say small, right, maybe I give you some perspective. So the typical application that we do at Toradex, they buy a few thousand to a few 10,000 boards per year per customer per project, right? So if
Okay.
you go in the hundred thousands, in the several hundred thousands, what customers normally do, they do a chip down design. So they do everything custom. And these are the typical customers that also Synaptics works directly with, right? And then we, Toradex, we come in these more smaller to medium sized customers. And these customers, they simply don't have the resources. They don't even have the connections in their supply chain to escalate. So what that means is they may not actually be able to build the devices right now because they have a missing part. They can't get the memory right now because it's an allocation situation. So my learning, and that's why the USP, or like where we put so much focus on with Toradex, is that ease of use, taking that risk away from the customer, us dealing with that risk, and letting them focus really on their application, and let Toradex handle the supply chain, the longevity of the boards, right? For instance, if you actually want to sell such a computer system for 10 years, continuously selling, there's a lot of work that goes into the life cycle management, not just on the software that we earlier talked about, in the field. Also on the hardware side, making sure that you can actually ship a product for 10 years time is a lot of work. So again, what I think what a lot of people underestimate is the ever increasing complexities of these systems and the need to really find the right partner to work with. Whether it's a technology partner like Synaptics, who has a modern processor platform with an actual roadmap, right? Some of these next generation processes that they're working on are very exciting, which gives you confidence that you have the right silicon partner that you're working with to also build your own product portfolio on. And then who do you work with on the system of module on the single board computer side? You have the right partner there who is there for you to support you that 10 years. Think about a medical
Right. Yeah.
device.
Yeah.
I mean, a certification of a medical device costs in the $1 million. If something in the supply chain fails down the road and you can't ship that device, the opportunity cost is huge, right? The loss of revenue. So I think I'll leave it there. It's really these ever increasing complexities on all fronts. And so that's why it's so important that you work with the right partner in the industry when you're building such IoT devices, AI enabled IoT devices.
Now, I ask all guests who come on Silicon Grapevine this show. So, what are the big lessons you've learned in life? Yeah, and what would you say to young Sam if he's starting out now?
That's a good one. Well, I don't say this lightly, but normally there's no silver bullet or no golden bullet. Um, it is really it is the experience that comes in, and at the end of the day that gets you there over the long run. You have to pay attention to what's happening out in the world. You have to incorporate that with your project schedules, with your technology choices. So yeah, but it's a very exciting environment to be in. We're at the forefront of technology with what we're doing with our products. So I would just say continue learning, right? It's the journey is to always embrace what's new and continuously learn and listen to your customers. Because sometimes, you get a big exciting project and it sounds almost too good to be true. It usually is too good to be true.
Yeah, and we're in a very interesting era in the history of technology. What excites you right now?
What excites me right now? So I mean, if you look at Toradex, we focus, we're very broad, right? I mean, we focus on robots, medical devices, transportation, energy. It goes even in some of the defense application. But what excites me right now, especially with AI and, in our industry, and AI may get a little bit a bad rep, right? In terms of, if you look in the computer science world, obviously, um, there is this concern that AI will take a lot of people's jobs and so on. I'm actually not so worried about that because for me, I see AI almost like what our industry went through 30 years ago with basically the personal computer, or 35 years ago. I mean, there was also a lot of worry that it will be very disruptive, but at the end of the day, it was actually very stimulating, and it created all new industry. So
It
where I
allows
want to
us to do
get to
this. It allows us to do this.
exactly, exactly. So where I want to get to is, for me, AI in our industry, especially in the IoT world, is very, very exciting for robotics applications. And you see that today because previously to program a robot, to tell a robot what to do, was very, very cumbersome. Now you can train a model with reinforcement learning, and finally, we can use all these robotics, even existing robotics platform, add an AI controller to it, and we can enable completely new use cases. And the same on the computer vision side. That's why I mentioned earlier these camera applications. Computer vision historically has been a very difficult complex, right? A lot of engineering resources. Now with AI, if you have a vision-based system, you can do suddenly there's so many new applications. So for us, it's actually I'm very excited about the technology in the IoT space that AI can now enable, and so I'm really looking forward to it. What's happening in the next 5 years? The downside is a little bit it's moving all very quick, so that's why I said you have to be very much on your toes with everything that's happening right now because it's moving faster than we're used to. I think that's the biggest challenge for all of us, right? This technology is evolving so fast, and you really have to pay attention to it.
Well, Sam Imgrueth, thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Silicon Grapevine, brought to you by Synaptics. Thank you, and we'll talk again.